249 families have consistently been receiving the full $75 a week family boost rebate for ECE costs. It was a key plank of National's tax cuts package. Finance Minister Nicola Willis, and she was quite demure when she said this. That kind of, we're going to do this and we're going to do it, all went away when she was kind of like, we're not quite sure. And it was a much calmer Nicola Willis last week when she had to admit that about half the families, which is 50,000, were getting the rebate as opposed to the 100,000 they promised. But even worse, in my opinion, than that, they were saying 21,000 families would receive $75 a week. 21,000, and it's 249. Now, I did the maths on that. That's 99.988% out. So 0.012% of what they said it would be. Now, one thing we didn't talk about last week, Barb, was the other part of this. I'm sure you've got these numbers in your head. 50 families, I think they said 3,000. I think the CTU said 3,000, actually. We'll check that. 50 families are also receiving National's full $250 a fortnight tax break. So there's only fewer than 50 families who are getting that, which all ties into this 249. Was it 3,000 families? Am I right? Were they saying 3,000 families would get that, or did they never release a number on that?
I saw the 50 families that the CTU came out with in Radio New Zealand last week. I mean, the main thing is this is a capital F for fail. This was their flagship 100%. Election policy, and they failed big time. But what's interesting, I mean, as you say, the minister looked a bit more demure.
Yeah.
Like I'd gone that night to church because the Pope had died the week before. So I joined our Catholic communities here in Wellington. And even they were talking to me about it after Mass had finished. They're like, oh, we just saw you on the news. And they were like, isn't that terrible, like what had happened? And then I had Anzac Day the next day. And the amount of people that had come up to me and were saying the same thing as well, was just like, oh, they failed that tax cut thing. It's a huge failure. Like, they promised so much, and the fact that, whether it's CTU numbers that you use are actually only 50 unique families get the full 250 tax cut, or whether it's the written parliamentary question that we got, which actually showed only 249 families received it, it's still a fail. Like you said, it's like, 1%? And so the Minister of Finance should be looking like she's got egg on her face, and we've been saying this for the last couple of quarters, because this is quarter 3 or 4 that happened, and we've been saying it both at the end of quarter 1 and at the end of quarter 2, like, you need to do something about this. And, we were basically getting the heat for it, saying, well, it's only just started. And it's like, no, we're now up to quarter 3 and it's still a failure. And the fact that only because we came out with the information saying they've failed, that Nicola Willis has actually said, oh yeah, we probably should have a look at it. It's like, that's just wrong. If we hadn't called it out, would you have just done nothing?
Yeah, there's 2 numbers here, yeah? And I think that we don't want to conflate them. The 2 numbers are, National promised $250 a fortnight as a tax rebate. And there's purely the ECE rebate, which was up to $75 a week. So the up to $75 a week is 250 families. But the ones who are getting the full 250, which will be people getting the ECE rebate and the other tax breaks and that, is only 50 families. So what that means, and this actually comes up in the Craig conversation, but not a part that you and I are going to look at. What that means is a subset of the 249 families. So you've got 249 families who are getting the maximum ECE rebate. So there's a subset of them that'll be getting the 250 a fortnight, and that's only 50 families. I'm pretty sure when they were pushed on it during election time, I should check this, they said 3,000 families would be receiving that 250 a fortnight. But I don't have those numbers to hand, so let's focus on the ECE rebate. The ECE rebate, if you were a manager at a business and you got given this job, you've got a nationwide plan, manager of this department, and this is your objective, to get 21,000 customers engaged in this plan, and you came back at the end of 2 or 3 quarters and you'd reached 250, you would be fired so quickly. You'd be on fire. You were so fast going out the door. And I don't know who or how. I can see that they're starting to blame IRD for this, but this is so bad, 99.988% wrong, that this is a fireable offence for someone. Someone needs to take responsibility for this because it's that bad. If they're out by 10% or 20%, you'd be like, nah, we could still criticise them for them because we're biased and we hate them all. I'm just joking. But 99.988% out, that should not be survivable for whoever's responsible for it.
But whoever is responsible is Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon, because if we've got the receipts which showed during the election on their family boost tax package, the actual, the paperwork that they had done, they had said 130,000 families would get family boost. So 130,000 families. And then obviously when they got into government, IRD did the best job they had with the information they had, and they said, well, maybe 100,000 families.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it still sits with them. Ultimately, this is the thing that also really annoys me, is take responsibility for it. It's your policy. It's your failure. Sure, IRD may have come up with estimates. However, your estimates was worse. It was 130,000 versus 100,000. And you're blaming officials who cannot speak for themselves. And I've worked for IRD, I've worked for revenue ministers, both blue and red, and I've been in those offices when these types of policies and discussions, for, tax packages for governments happen. And the really key thing is that if you're the minister, if I was in her shoes as the Minister of Finance, you usually have fortnightly meetings between Treasury and IRD. You'd be drilling it in every fortnightly meeting, saying, how are we going with that uptake? What are we doing? Do we need to put more resources into getting greater advertising about this? What is the difficulty that families are having with receiving this entitlement? Because this is what it is. It's an entitlement. So, if Christopher Luxon can get his entitlements easily, why can't our families?
Yep, he's entitled to his entitlements. He told us that enough times before he then cancelled it because it was too embarrassing for him. So that bodes the question, if they should have been talking about this every 2 weeks, have they? And have they just kind of hoped and prayed this wouldn't come out and wouldn't go away? What are your thoughts?
I think they just hoped and prayed that this wouldn't come out. But the thing is, that's what written parliamentary questions are for, right? And that's what the opposition, our job as the Labour Party, is for, is to hold them to account. So again, I believe, given that they've, the last couple of times that we've brought this to light, that they're like, oh, it's great that the Labour Party is trying to advertise our policy. And it's like, yes, because that's what you promised, and people should be entitled to what you promised. Yes. I mean, I remember during the election campaign, a room full of workers basically saying, well, we're not going to, yes, we traditionally vote for Labour, but we're not going to vote for you because we're getting a $250 tax cut. And that was rubbish. Yeah. Absolutely rubbish.